So yes, we're going to spend this hour talking about the vaccine effect, as Joyce said. We're 3 months into this global vaccine rollout, and some of us, some countries have fared better than others as we roil through these new strains and distribution hurdles. This study is a capture of the opinion and emerging behavior of this admittedly messy and very experimental time. So what you'll see enclosed within is a global analysis of how the vaccine is impacting the world at large. So there's 3 sections. We're really going to talk about 3 core things that we'll address here: where we are now, where we're going, and what brands need to do next. Our entire study is founded on a very simple formula. We believe that emotion and its context are the keys to understanding and anticipating emerging behavior. So what you'll see today is an analysis of these things. This formula, built on context and emotion, again, is very straightforward and simplistic on purpose. There's so much data, though, that exists within each of these frames. When we're talking about context, we're talking about macro and micro context, macro things being like this pandemic here, down to the very personal, hyper contextual things going on in your daily life at that very moment in time. These factors are deep and complex layers of data that help us identify collisions that point to emerging behavior. So this entire study is seeking to find and understand these triggers of context and emotion as they point to what is coming in behavior. The Harte Hanks Behavioral Index is really a responsive intelligence platform. It's always on, always up and running. It's built from, you'll see these 6 stacked data sets here, and a whole lot of human input and anthropology. But it is all aimed at predicting what people will do next. The time frame we analyzed here in this wave is technically from February 11th to March 11th, although we looked back at the entire year, and you'll see some of that roll up in comparative data. We have been looking at this. This is our 5th wave of this study. We have been looking at this since we all went on lockdown at the beginning of last year. This wave, we talked directly to 2,637 people. We analyzed 125 brands. We did about 20 different brand diagnostic studies assessing behavioral metrics and marketing drivers for the next wave of this pandemic, as well as looking at a ton of digital data, 1 billion plus social and search behaviors, and then looked at things like over 40,000 pieces of content, new media, blogs, etc., as well as did a language comparison to analyze the way we were talking before this wave in February to March, as well as now. So a lot of data coming into this study. And what we found is that we are entering a new phase. This is the dawn of a new era in human behavior. This new phase is something much different than the year we just experienced. And similar to the tremors of last March, where we were in this behavioral reset, we are again in a massive behavioral reset. So important to know that this is not just another reporting on what's happened in this pandemic, but rather a signifier of the new future that's ahead. It's been called everything from the Great Pause to the lost year, yet it's been anything but. We have had extreme change during this year. Yes, while we've paused and thought, we had great epiphanies, and it's something that we call the epiphany economy. We believe the entire structure of the bounce back will be built around this frame. It is the momentum for the new world. And what we mean by epiphany economy is that over the past year, we have been obviously had this epiphany about how fragile our lives were, how vulnerable we are. And each of us were having these individual epiphanies, like my money is fragile, or I need more play in my life, or I am the one who has to protect my health. Like all of these little epiphanies that we've had have caused us to have new connections, reevaluated the institutions that are in our lives, even the brands that are in our lives. So these epiphanies of this pandemic year are now the engine driving behavior, again, this new phase that we're in, and empowering us to recapture what we've lost and to remake our world in new ways. And wow, have we seen new worlds being created. Behavioral ingenuity is now expected. Even just this image of this mass COVID testing and vaccine distribution systems that we've created out of nothing. We've never done something at this scale before, and yet we are inventing every day on the fly. We have instituted a new speed to action. There's an understanding that things don't have to be perfect anymore. We just need to get it out there and learn and iterate as we go along. Much like we've seen in our technology brethren over the year, it's now a norm for us to scrum and sprint towards solutions in our everyday lives. We have had novel resources. Brands that were known for making whiskey are now making hand sanitizer, PPE evolution inside our manufacturing systems across the world. This idea of novel resourcing will impact business going forward. We'll look at brands in new ways. We'll look at brands as humans to do more for us than just what we've seen them do for their history. We've had a lot of equality activation and communal efforts around this, everything we've been through with these layers of tragedy and wayfinding between politics and protests and the pandemic and the new vaccine. All of this has played into the way we think about equality in our communities. And yet with all this ingenuity and all this wonderful movement and epiphany that we've had, it's also left us quite scarred, frustrated, and hanging on the edge as we wait in line for our cure. And it depends on where you sit in the world, how frustrated you are. But holistically, 87% say the vaccine is not being made available quickly enough for them. And no surprise, because what was once welcome, what was novel to us is now tiresome. That novelty is long gone. Harvard did a study of about 46 different countries, the workforce of 46 different countries, and 85% of them said the well-being had declined. 55% of them felt that they were unable to balance their work and home lives. So what was once welcome, oh, this is great, I'm home with my family, I can bond with them more, etc. All of that stuff we saw in the early days of the pandemic now is gone. And while we've had these epiphanies about closeness and family togetherness, we now want to swing that pendulum back a little bit, and how can we embrace those things but still go back to these ways of working that made us feel more connected on a daily basis to the world around us. And in fact, that burnout is the other global health crisis right now. We don't talk about it in those terms quite yet, but some of our leading organizations, psychological institutions, the World Health Organization are talking about burnout as this new next global health crisis. 43% have reported some adverse mental health symptoms because of COVID this year. And it's not just mental health issues. We're seeing physical ramifications of this. 23% have reported drinking more alcohol. 33% reported anxiety and depression symptoms. These are higher numbers than we're used to seeing. And 50% of parents have gained as much as 36 pounds during the pandemic. And the list goes on: teeth grinding, repetitive stress injuries, sitting ailments, maskne, acne under your mask, dead butt syndrome, it's called, where from sitting so much, our nerve endings on our underneath our body are being affected. And holistically, the COVID-15, even if you're not a parent, a weight gain, of about 15 pounds. All of these physical ailments are stacking up and causing even greater anxiety. But it's being certain demographics are being affected more so than others. In fact, Gen Z has been hit the hardest by isolation. 46% of those who feel most isolated are Gen Z, and we've been tracking them wave to wave, looking at this particular emotion of isolation. And we've studied about 22 different emotions, but always isolation is being owned at about 46% by Gen Z. They are, in addition, 25% more fearful than millennials, their closest generational brethren, and 59% most recently have said they've had a great deal of change in socializing with friends in the last few months, and they hate it. The post-holiday surge likely is a part of this, and then all the variant surges that we've had in various countries across the world have kept Gen Z away from their friends, and I think they started to see a glimmer of hope, and that was pulled away over the past few months. So why we're seeing, again, these isolation numbers so high for this particular demographic. So if you as a brand are dealing with Gen Z on any level, think about how you can get closer to them and help them feel closer and more connected to the world, because they're the generation in need of it the most. And then we've seen, in order to cope, people have been embracing new behaviors that are focused on touch and real connection. This idea of the pandemic puppy is a real thing. In fact, 24% said that they love the change getting a pet brought to their lives during COVID. The pandemic puppy is not just a new pet you can bring into your home, but something here, as the Wall Street Journal covered, that you can rent. You can rent a little puppy just to come by and give you a hug. So this idea of touch and feel and real connection is the thing that we're yearning for the most. And we're looking to recapture what we've lost. This verbatim, I think, captures it most. This was one of the retired women in our survey said to us, "I hope that things return to normal so I can get back to my dreams." So this idea of feeling like your life has been on hold, I know many of us have felt that way while we've been in this incredible explosive growth period intellectually and even psychologically. We have felt like we've been on hold. In fact, 13% of all conversation right now in this period is about wanting to get back to normal or how to get back to normal. In fact, our resolutions reveal a desire to reclaim ourselves in a new way. We just went through a new year, and when we started tracking resolutions at the beginning of the year and how people were keeping up with them, this is what they had to say to us. Things that we had not heard before. So obviously, the idea of eating healthier and exercising more were at the top of the list. But we didn't hear things like, I've got to lose 10 pounds, or like these things you typically hear during resolution time. But rather, I need to stand up for what I believe in and keep in closer contact with friends and family. And then this one that we love, 35% say they're going to be kinder to people this year. So our ingenuity that we talked about is turning from these public sources of ingenuity into these very private sources of ingenuity as we reframe our lives around health and humanity, and that this will be the theme, at least for the coming year. Our minds shifted immediately on December 8th, when we saw this beautiful grandmother in the UK get the first vaccine shot. And that was the shot heard around the world. And so what we did was went immediately into language to analyze and see, well, what is going on? How are people feeling about this? And what we saw was overnight, I mean, literally overnight, we moved from a dream state into serious action. Our language became super strict and utilitarian, whereas before the vaccine, we were talking about, ugh, I'm stuck in this house, I'm on lockdown, and I just want to go outside. I just want to be normal again. And then after the vaccine, we saw 15 times people were more likely to use explanatory language, helpful language, utilitarian language. Where can I get the vaccine? How long is it going to take? When is it my country's turn? When is it my town's turn? It became very, very specific. Where do I go for help? We went almost like to brass tacks, I would say. And then the world's entire conversation turned to the vaccine, whereas before we were talking about issues and reporting symptoms and all of that kind of thing. We went immediately into where are the vaccine distribution centers? What are the companies that are going to be distributing the vaccine? How can I access it? What is a vaccine passport anyway? More health and well-being content linked to the vaccine. So all of the world turned its attention to vaccine conversation. And then our behaviors became more serious too. We were already over indexing on safety, but we've upped the ante even further. 56% in this last wave said they're looking for new ways now to keep their family healthy. This is not during the entire pandemic. This is just in the last wave. This is up 7 points from the last time we measured in September. 50% say they're much more mindful of the people with whom they connect. So these behaviors, these serious behaviors, will come with us into the future. And since then, we've seen a drumbeat of positivity, and you can see it and feel it around you, right? Every time a new health company introduced a new vaccine, or we heard new news from one of our health organizations about the vaccine rollout, it was this blip of positivity, but over time it's become had this incredible cumulative effect on us. And the economic models are following suit. We've seen forecasters have increased and boosted their forecasts because of the boost of confidence from the vaccine. In fact, economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal boosted their forecasts for 2021 to 5.95%, which would be the fastest growing economy since 1983. And it's important to note, though, people still have a belief that it's going to take up to a year or more for this to happen. 66% of people that we surveyed said this, but the economists' positivity is, again, adding layers to the vaccine positivity. And all of this is radically affecting our emotional state. We've not seen numbers this positive for over a year. What you're seeing in front of you is what we call the emotional index, which is part of our behavioral index. And we measure, as I said, about 24 different emotions. We do a factor analysis and bundle them up into these 5 core emotions from anger to joy. And you can see for the entire year, we've been hovering in this area of uncertainty, teetering back and forth and swinging between hope and fear. Well, now we are decidedly 9 points ahead, closer to hope. And we are claiming this as our current emotional state now. We are incredibly hopeful. And it's really interesting when you start to think about these emotions that bundle here. Some of the negative emotions have actually shifted to positive emotions. Thinking of one in particular, watchfulness, which was bundling with fear earlier in our waves, is now bundling with hope. We are watchful and hopeful for the future. And you can see the dramatic increases. This is the gap analysis of emotion just in the last wave since September. We've seen a 44% increase in joy, a 22% increase in hope, and then uncertainty has decreased by 18%, fear down 27%, anger down 45%. So that's a big number. People are starting to turn towards hope and joy. And Gen Z and boomers feel more uncertain than other generations. It's important to remember that, as we talked about earlier, but they're still more positive than they've been. They were definitely much lower in the rankings in September. So it's a holistic move towards positivity. And there's a slight difference in degrees of hope between the rich and poor. Again, another thing to think about as you're marketing, that not everyone is as hopeful as everyone next to them. If you are making under 100K or you have less education, you tend to be less hopeful right now than those that are more educated and making more. And that makes perfect sense. But there is no one, you have to think about the generational differences. You have to think about the economic and racial divide when you're thinking about hope and positivity in this new shift to this new era in human behavior. And our brains have physically changed, and they change when we're hopeful. The neurological systems wire differently. And because of that, so does our behavior. We have higher motivation, better problem solving. We're more cognitively flexible, meaning we can make decisions much quicker than we used to. So think about that when you're presenting to your customers, you're presenting decisions or new products or cross-selling to them or something like that. They're more likely to make faster decisions. So make sure it's very finite and crafted for them and more helpful for them so they can make those decisions quicker. And you deal better with novel situations when you're hopeful. So again, back to that idea of new product introductions. If we are in this spirit and mindset psychologically of being more cognitively elastic, then we can present new ideas and new innovations and new ways of thinking about our brands now, and people will accept them much more readily and quickly than they would have in the past. So just a point about hope, it is a cognition that creates a certain mood. It's a prolonged emotional state. It's not reflexive like anger is or fear is. So people who are hopeful tend to handle stress differently because of this, this prolonged emotional state. Hope is like mental time travel. It's the best way to think about it. By imagining what you want, your behavior is unconsciously structured to create it. In fact, we've seen, again, when we looked at language, a shift towards language of expectation. 5.4 times more likely people are to use language of expectation. I want to do this. I am going to do this. This is my goal. This is my future. I am so excited to do this after the pandemic. All of that expectation language means something to us as marketers. Our job now is to help people imagine the future and set goals. Back to my comment about utility earlier, this is exactly a perfect partner to wed with that idea of serious utility with planning for the future and all that beautiful emotion that exists around hope. So let's take a look then and see how this hope is going to impact this behavioral bounce back, as we're calling it. People are absolutely driving to reclaim themselves through hope, and this idea of reclamation is where we need to play. It is important to note, though, we're still dealing with a lot of change in our lives. The intensity of change now compared with 4 months ago remains the same. So again, this is just this wave. We asked people to identify where are they now experiencing a great deal of change. And you can see these numbers are pretty dramatic. I mean, the ones we would expect, 50% saying that there's a great deal of change connecting and socializing with friends and family. But you see all the way at the bottom of the list, things we typically don't see on these kind of lists, like buying insurance for myself and family, a 12% great deal of change in this most recent wave, purchasing or refinancing a home, a great deal of change. So these numbers in things that we're not typically seeing. The other one I want to point out is shopping for prescription medicines, a great deal of change. This is a category that we typically have a longer sales cycle. But now, again, because of this behavioral reset, people are rethinking the way they're purchasing things. And because of hope, we'll be making decisions more quickly. But the discontent has also intensified. So while we say there's all this great change, it's important to know also that the people really hate the change. And that has intensified wave over wave. The blue in this chart is September. The lavender in this chart is February. So you can see the intensity of discontent is more significant now, and it makes sense. It is, a psychological fact. As we get closer to the end of something, our emotion tends to intensify, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. So as you're preparing messaging and thinking about how to communicate with people in real time right now, know that they are literally on the edge. And as a result, the expectations for the vaccine run really, really high. The percentage of people feeling hopeful about the vaccine's impact on their life in these various things is tracking all in the 75 to 85% range. And so that's huge. Things like family togetherness and entertainment outside the home and my social life are the top three on the expectation list after the vaccine is delivered. But women and men really differ in their expectations, and it's quite dramatic. And we've all heard a lot of the conversation about women. 82% of women have said their lives have been affected by the pandemic. A lot of that is in a negative way. Men are more likely to talk about themselves and independent activities, while women are more likely to talk about others. But the men, when we started to dig into this, they're more likely to talk about travel at 1.7 times more likely than women, 4 times more likely to talk about business travel. So when we looked into it, we found that they're actually concerned about the loss of the dual income because women have been either laid off or exiting the workforce in greater numbers. So a lot of that independent talk might be bundled up in this really human insight. But they are holistically, however, 10% more hopeful than women. So in looking at women, their entire conversation is focused on others, and they're 2.2 times more likely to talk about the sadness for what's been lost, and they talk about certainly the people that have been lost during COVID, but also their lives. They've lost not only massive job loss, but they've lost progress, and they acknowledge that progress will be lost because they've been out of the workforce or will be out of the workforce for a serious amount of time before reentry after the pandemic. They talk about education more and loved ones more, and they are 10 percentage points more uncertain. So again, when you're talking about hope messaging with women in particular, you have to consider that they need a more gender equitable recovery, and so our messaging needs to follow suit. The biggest bounce back, however, is among millennials. Prior to the vaccine, millennials were actually the most stressed and fearful of all the generations. We've seen a complete about face. You can see the average at 100 for our study right down the center, and then the millennial behavior is just skyrocketing and over-indexing above that on everything. They're looking forward to business travel and finances and mental health and shopping habits, all these things they expect to come back after the vaccine. It's this big surge in positivity, and it's quite notable because for the most part, millennials are at the end of the line in terms of who gets the vaccine. And so as they get closer to the vaccine, their positivity will only increase. And that anticipation, is a lot of that anticipation that millennials carry is everything. 81% believe the vaccine will have at least some impact on their vacation travel. So there's all this pent-up anticipation and emotion around travel for sure. But interestingly, when we asked about what is at the top of the post-vaccine list, it was everyday activities like visiting a barber or a hair salon, eating out at a restaurant, or starting to go back to the office every day. There's a lingering longing to reconnect with our colleagues, and it's important to note that this was so high on the list in terms of what people are looking forward to after the vaccine. And so a word on millennials, they are turning 40 this year. Some of them, starting in January of this year, turned 40. And with that, they will be driving this new economy and all the behavioral trends surrounding it. People over profit, progressive movements, humanized technology, more DTC innovation, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, meaning DTC meaning direct to consumer or e-commerce. An evolution in entertainment. They've always been known for doing this, but we'll see even more of that this year. And know that they are, as they turn 40, this 40 to 50 decade is the peak earning and spending years. So a similar thing happened back when boomers entered their 40s in 1986, the booming Reagan years, if you recall. Something similar is going to happen this year with the millennials. And it's all about change. Hope is ushering a greater openness to change. 42% say they're more likely to try new things now compared with a few months ago. And that is a dramatic increase of 17 points from when we measured in September. So this idea of changeability, think about this for anyone who is a brand manager out there. So this is the time for switch and switch programming. People will change brands. People are looking for new ways of doing things, new products to enter their lives, etc. And relationships might be the first order of business post-vaccine. 76% say they're likely to start a new relationship, and 73% say they will end one. And these relationships, by the way, these shifts in relationships include brands. 35% say they're much more mindful of the brands they choose. So when you start to bundle this data point with the one above, that we start to have this realization that relationships are in flux, new customers are coming, there will be a new world order in terms of who is our audience, how will they interact with us, and how long will they be with us. That the entire onboarding process becomes really important in a moment like this where relationships are in flux. And I just think this idea of never before have we been in an era where every single one of your customers are planning for the future. Every single one of your customers are thinking about their relationships and how they interact with the world. That has never really happened at this scale before. So just that this is the time, there is a push coming. And this idea of mindfulness, of thinking about relationships and how we interact and who we interact with is really driving the next phase of this epiphany economy.
All right. So, we took all the emotional and contextual insights that Gretchen has been talking about and tried to put together some core things, some core implications for brands and marketers, right? So what can we expect to happen for the rest of the year and beyond? Or in other words, 5 behavioral epiphanies, because we've been on that theme for a while. So the first one that came to us is, again, it's no surprise, e-commerce. E-commerce has been huge in our lives, right? In the last 12 months and beyond, e-commerce, online shopping, I should say, has kind of skyrocketed in influence and in popularity across many categories. And we think when you look ahead, yes, that's going to continue to grow. But e-commerce or consumers will expect more experiential benefits inside of e-commerce. So for example, yes, on free shipping, fast delivery, great returns, all those things are going to continue to be important. But things like customer service, friendly customer service, making shopping online more fun, more social, introducing greater importance to chat, more human access inside of something that has traditionally been on a screen-based impersonal shopping experience. This is going to change. I mean, you can also think of all the fast popularity rise in social shopping, right? When Walmart starts to partner with TikTok to sell goods, change is coming or is here already. So we'll be keeping a close eye on where that's going. The second epiphany, you can't have this conversation without thinking about health, because for better or worse, health has been brought to our top of mind. Our collective consciousness is totally focused on health. It is health protection is the new self-defense. So gone are I think we are seeing a movement that goes far beyond fad diets and fitness regimes, but people are beginning to talk about wholesale lifestyle change, right? In our own data, says 90% of people said they are likely to exercise more, even after the vaccine has been, they've received the vaccines, signifying an acknowledgement of the need to protect their health. That doesn't, it's not about fixing COVID and then moving on, going back to our old bad ways, but it's really, staying on that health regimen. So we have really learned new behaviors, and we'll have to keep an eye on that as we move forward. The next one, again, one of the critical needs. Who knew travel was going to be such an incredibly important human need? But people are looking forward to traveling again once they have their vaccines. But what we are seeing is that travel, of course, will bounce back, but the bounce back will be slower, partly because of the rollout speed of the vaccines. But people are also focusing on more meaningful types of travel. For example, what we are seeing in our data is the top priority for travel is visiting family and friends. Family togetherness is going to be the key driver for travel. Some of it might mean taking family vacations, but more of it is going to be about visiting family you haven't seen for a whole year. So maybe we are going to deprioritize visiting vacation hotspots more over going up and seeing our parents or children or friends. So reconnecting family is becoming a big driver for travel in the coming year. And the next one, again, something we have kind of forgotten in the last 12 months, because opportunities for real play has been far and few in between. Real play is as important as work. We have learned that because as we are working from home, if you're lucky enough to hold on to our jobs or working from home, there's a grind to it. There was something interesting about having a proper start and an end to your workday. But now the workday sort of fuses into your personal life. So we think that we have to be ready for a big bounce back in terms of free, real play. Entertainment is going to be huge, beyond, extending way beyond watching streamed entertainment on Netflix. There'll be more avenues that people will be searching for when it comes to entertainment. And we think it, interestingly enough, this will be a behavioral trend that will be additive to the health focus that we saw earlier. They go kind of hand in hand. Real play is not just a frivolous exercise. There have been tons of research done, books written about how unstructured play is essential to our survival as a species. That may seem far-fetched, but it is really true. And this is not just about kids or children. It really means a lot to adults as well. And so we can see people getting ready for that. 72% say they will not have a regular 9-to-5 workday anymore because we have seen the other side. We have seen another way of living and working. And 85% say vaccine will definitely positively impact entertainment outside the home. So again, for brands in the entertainment space, it's something to keep an eye on. Last but not least, action. Brand action was always important, right? To build loyalty and trust was always important, but today it is heightened in importance. We as consumers, as people, we expect brands to show that they understand our needs, they show they care, and provide meaningful actions as a response to those understanding. So these pictures on the slide just represent two actions that General Motors took in the last 12 months. One was to retrofit their factories to make, that used to make transmissions, I believe, into making face masks and other PPE. And then more recently, they have announced that they're going to make all their car lines fully electric by 2035. So it demonstrates the company's willingness to really do what's necessary for the welfare of the individual, as well as welfare of society and the world. And those actions are rewarded by people today. So, and why is all this important? Because there are certain entrepreneurs, smart marketers, they're watching this space, right? So Kevin O'Leary, who's a celebrity as well as an entrepreneur through his Shark Tank exposure, he talks about how he's going to do everything he could to develop a direct relationship with customers. And again, why is he saying that? It's sort of a no-brainer. If you can build that tremendous amount of trust, you almost create a subscription service, meaning you train consumers and customers to come to you automatically for all their needs. So that notion of building trust to gain business, it's the oldest trick in the book, I should say, but still it's become more relevant today than ever before. And when you think about motivating behavior to serve that need of building that direct connection, it's really all about trust and integrity. We have it from our own data. What makes you choose a new brand today? And of course, quality and affordability are very important. It's right there at the top. We're calling them table stakes. Without it, we'd have nothing to stand on. But right below that, reliability, a measure of trust. Honesty, we were quite surprised to see that. It's a core value that people are now placing more importance on, right? Honesty, transparency, and so on. And also societal focus, protecting people's health, protecting the environment. And this is in general, it applies across categories. So those kind of values are becoming ever more important today as a means to building trust. And, unfortunately, brands today aren't faring as well as trusted sources. And this is a critical question, especially in today's context. Where will you go for vaccine information you can trust? Brands like healthcare company or brand websites was one of the sources we had listed, assuming that they would rank somewhere at the top, because who wants to trust their governments, right? Especially in today's political climate all over the world. But unfortunately, brands rank very low in this list. And that's a problem as well as an opportunity. We need to move as a category of brands and companies, we need to move further up. We need people to come to us first, or at least think of us as a right source of source for the right information. So there's a trust deficiency. And it's a problem because without trust, information doesn't get to the right hands, and worse, it delays actions. And you see it playing out all over the world. Conflicting information about the efficacy of the vaccines, and which delays the rollout of the vaccine, which delays the bounce back. And from our language analysis, we see that people who are skeptical of the vaccine are 27 times more likely to use the phrase, "I don't understand." So it's really lack of knowledge, a lack of real data that is driving that skepticism, right? And if we can address that lack of information, lack of knowledge, then we can remove some of the skepticism and bring more people into the vaccine fold and help drive the bounce back much faster. So, brands really have to create trust with both empathy and action. Have the consumer understand what people need, show that you care, and then offer up the action. Provide meaningful actions to deliver on that need, on that understanding. So what we have done, this is, we've been working on this for about 2 years now. We're calling it the Most Motivating Brands Framework. We took 9 brand design factors, and through data analysis, organized them into two vectors of influence. One is action, and the other is empathy, based on what I've been talking about till now. So when you get these two axes, it allows us to create a brand management framework that we can look at brand's ability to influence someone to behave in a certain way. So if you go to the next slide, which, and again, it's very convenient, right? When you have two axes crossing, you have these four interesting clusters emerge, four quadrants. And what's interesting here is when you look at the bottom left quadrant, what we're calling the underdeveloped potential, that's where brands with low empathy and low action reside. And I'll show you some more data just in a minute. And here you want to get out of that quadrant as fast as you can, because you don't want to be there, because you have brands that are capable of a lot more. We can create more understanding, we can create more meaningful actions and get out of there. And we have seen brands that are in the next up quadrant, we're calling active emerging, where interestingly enough, they're doing a lot of actions. So you're getting high score on action, but a lower score on empathy. And that is, again, a great chance to build greater understanding of the brand's purpose, brand's insights into what people need out there. And similarly, I don't want to go through each of the quadrants, but you get the picture that you can move a brand life cycle through this system of management frameworks. So very useful tool that we've been using with our clients. And this is, we don't need to look at individual dots on this page, but this is all the 125 brands we've been tracking since we started doing this study and analysis on this framework. So you see there is a cluster of brands. There are many brands that are in the top right, high empathy, high action quadrant. We're calling the most motivating brands. And then there's a dispersion across the other quadrants as well. So our objective is to help brands move along the right way to get to the top right space. And when you do that, here's just a list of what we found in our most recent analysis. The top 15th percentile, brands that scored from 85 to 100% in our percentile ranking system. Yes, you have some brands that you expect to be there. Amazon has had a wonderful year, especially with the mainstreaming and acceleration of e-commerce. Google, where we've been going to for all our information. But what's interesting with this top 15 list is that some of these brands have been asterisked. I don't know if you can see them, but Clorox, Lysol, Mayo Clinic, Walgreens, Johnson & Johnson, MyChart, brands that some big, some small, who have been playing in the healthcare space. Again, it shows you how healthcare as a need and as a category has hit people's radar in a way that it's never done before, right? And it's brands that being given credit for that. And in terms of vaccine effect, we thought it was an interesting and fun way to look at this data. We had measured Pfizer early last year, maybe mid last year in 2020, and we also measured Pfizer as a corporate brand in February. So you look at the jump the brand has taken from 2020, when they were really in the low empathy, low action quadrant, along with some other pharmaceutical companies, and they've made us, really skyrocketed to the most motivating brands quadrant, which is very interesting. And again, it's all credit to the powerful action they've taken and people giving them credit for the amazing vaccine effort they have undertaken. And also Johnson & Johnson, which is already held in high regard in 2020, but even they moved up quite a bit in 2021. And again, Johnson & Johnson benefits from the higher empathy score they get. And I talked about the 9 design factors that go into defining empathy and action. And you see the green line represents the brand status in 2020, and the yellow line is 2021. And you see how the Pfizer brand expanded in ways that we have never seen before in our data set. again, all can be drilled back down to the amazing actions that the brand has taken that demonstrates the understanding of what people are facing and that what they need. So again, this may be it may be a rare example of such a dynamic, but it proves our point, our thesis that meaningful action matters. That's what people are looking for. And now I need to drink a glass of water.
That's a meaningful action.
That's a meaningful action.
Both Suresh and I talked about the incredible push that's coming, this dawn of the new era in human behavior, the vaccine effect, and this new psychological state of hope and how that impacts the way people make decisions. There's really only one question for your brand, and that is, what is your role in the bounce back? And it seems simple and it seems silly, but think about it. Have you sat down around a table virtually and talked about what your role is in this bounce back? How will you impact the world? All this massive influx of future planning and need for tools and utility and in driving and dreaming up and remaking ourselves. What is your role in all of that? How will you act? Will you be like GM? Will you be like Pfizer? And how can you borrow from what we've learned this past year of brands that have taken on empathy and action? What's your role? What are you going to represent? Is it a singular demographic? Is it a particular area of behavior? But think about it and pinpoint it. And know that the vaccine effect is not business as usual. You don't just roll back to normal. This is not this normal, and we've talked about the new normal or the next normal and all those fun little words, but this is a completely new consumer. It's a completely new way of behaving. So it's not business as usual. You can't do what you did, year after year after year in marketing certain products and programs. It's a completely different mindset, a new neuroplasticity, as we talked about. The architecture of decision making has completely changed. So 3 things. Audit your motivation. What Suresh just took us through in terms of understanding where you sit in the world with empathy, where you sit, how people perceive you as an action-oriented brand. Do they think you're relevant? Do they think you're responsive? Do they think you're innovative and authentic? All of those things you need to know now because you can, again, pinpoint what you need to fix. And then retool. And we use the word tool for a reason. People need utility, tools, and planning engagement right now. You need to identify the gaps between what the customer expects of you and what you're delivering, and then deliver and create utility to solve for that. And then the third is just speed to execution. Get to market fast with your ideas. If we've learned anything from this past year, people are more accepting, in fact, more open to brands that will get into market, pilot an idea, iterate with them, and build it with them. It's okay to be raw. It's better now to be raw than to wait for perfect. So get to market, solve problems, and iterate is the main theme there. So I hope that this summation of what's going on in human behavior, the specific things brands can do is inspiring to you. We certainly have a ton more data that sits under this. We just had an hour. So please reach out to us if you have specific questions. I'm sure we've got some kind of answer, or we can work together to speed to execute. So Jen, I'm going to turn it back to you for any questions that may have come in, and we're open, again, questions, comments, thoughts, provocative ideas, anything in this next 5 to 10 minutes together.
That was fantastic. So I do have a few questions, and I will read them to you both, and you guys can fight over who's going to answer. How's that?
Perfect.
So the first one is, I think certain brands, especially ones that aren't familiar with that personal connection, will have to step outside of that comfort zone. What advice would you give to those types of brands?
Yeah. Now's not the time for being shy, I would say. The idea of connection is not like it may have been a couple of years ago, where like we've got to get our engagement program together and connect with more people, and we've got to be all about social media and connecting. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking, as Suresh was iterating around, talking about empathy, that true human connection, the need that people have to rely on brands now. The wall has shattered, it is down. They need us to help them rebuild and remake their lives. So every brand has an opportunity to connect with their customers, and customers are more willing than ever to connect with us now. So again, back to that stat about relationships being in flux, now is the time. Suresh, do you have anything particular to say about like how to get started with connection?
No, I think the key is what you sort of closed your comments with, which is people are more mindful today than ever before. We have seen it in our data as well. So it's almost like their ears are pricking up. They're expecting brands to do something, to say something. Now, it's interesting the way the question was asked. Some brands are not familiar with personal connection or something like that. What's interesting is, just in the last 6 months, even brands who are supposedly so in with the personal connection bit have been getting it wrong, right?
Yeah.
Making missteps. So there is no blanket permission given to brands so that you fully understand personal connection. Maybe if you don't get personal connection, so maybe you approach it much more meaningfully and much more carefully, and more likely to end up with the right solution, rather than certain brands, maybe whatever category they may be, who said, oh, we know, we get empathy, so we know what we do.
This might be a silly example, but we've seen it recently, brands experimenting with vaccine rewards, like Krispy Kreme, a brand that's very good at connecting with people, right? Is offering free donuts if you flash your vaccine selfie. But we've seen other brands in the tech space, B2B space, that have been giving vaccine rewards as well, like $50 off your software download if you hashtag vaccine in this, retweet and hashtag us in this. So the idea of like helping spread information, brands are rewarding customers for helping us all get healthy again. So that's a really simple connection point. I think there's a bigger human opportunity here, but connecting doesn't have to be overwrought or overthought. Yeah, any other questions, Jen?
I have a couple more. By nature, fad diets and lifestyle changes usually have a short shelf life. That's a tough couple of words. Do you envision making people making the change for a healthier life for the long term?
Oh yeah, for sure. And Suresh, I know you presented this epiphany, but that is, if anything screamed out from this study, this time it was that people are trying to protect themselves. They recognize it's their job now to protect themselves. We've been through this epiphany that, I am my own defense. I've got to wash my hands, sanitize, care for my family, make sure our packages are wiped down, or whatever we were doing in the beginning of the pandemic. This idea of protection this epiphany has caused our health behaviors to change into these wholesale lifestyle changes. So yeah, I think the idea of like fad diets is gone. The idea of and we see it on Instagram, a lot of these like fitness challenges, which are lovely, but it's more about like my everyday existence, and it's different than everyday wellness. I think this is much different than this. This is, again, from a much deeper emotional space of this realization that I am my own defense. That's different than I need to lose 10 pounds and be healthier, right? It's health has become much more important in our lives. It's not something for our doctors to worry about anymore. It's something for us to worry about and us to worry about and care for. You'll see caretaking behaviors on the rise in the next year. People will be more communal about health, these wholesale health changes, et cetera. Suresh, do you have anything to add to that, since you did talk about that?
No, you covered it. The only other point I would emphasize is, we have had a long time, year to be exact, to learn new behaviors, right? And we have time to repeat them. And that's key to us learning real behavior change and being able to practice and stick with it. We were forced to do that. So I feel like we have been in a training program for the last 12 months, and what we learned is going to stay with us for a while. This wasn't a fad, but what we all just went through. So the focus on healthier living is going to stay with us for a while.
Yeah, it will. That will be the thematic. I do expect there to be some kind of a balance, though, as we start that other epiphany we had about play being as important as work. Well, play as a thematic in our lives will become more important than it ever has. So when you start to think about play, and I know you mentioned health, the link to health and play, but just in the behaviors, like treating ourselves to a Krispy Kreme I just mentioned, like that's fine as long as I have this protective health behavior balancing it out. So as we get back out into the world, I think there's going to be fun to be had with our lifestyles and our lives, because we have this more depth of foundation around our health protection.
A couple more questions. We have so many different cultural differences among our population. Were there differences seen or measured based on cultural family backgrounds?
Yeah, so we have data, regional data. We have data specific to race and ethnicity, gender. We talked about economic diversity. And one thing that we were tracking, and we didn't go super deeply into it in this particular presentation, but there is a lot of data pointing to people trying to solve for inequalities or cultural discrepancies, et cetera. So that thematic we did explore as well. And but yes, every rollout is different. It's kind of, while we're all like in this same territory of hope and vaccine rollout utility and the seriousness that's going on now, we have every single zip code in the world, every single country in the world has a different rollout. So with that comes in a different emotional state. They have different complexity in terms of how culture impacts how they view the elderly in their society, how children are treated, and the importance that we put in youth in different, whether it's Brazil or a country in Asia. Like thinking about those cultural differences, that will absolutely impact the emotional index and the contextual behavior that comes out of it.
Okay. A couple of different people asked about whether the presentation would be available, and it definitely will. We will have it on our website, on our Insights page in a little, probably in about an hour. Once we have the recording, we'll upload both of those, so you can download the PDF and or share the webinar with your colleagues. There are a couple more questions. I don't know. I know we're a little bit over time, but I'll ask them. And if you all want to stay on, that's great. You said e-com will become more experiential. Is it safe to say that this should really be applied across the board?
That's a great question. Yeah, and we talked about that. I think the idea, and then it's linked to that connection conversation we were just having. The human element, bringing in the human element to the e-com environment is a truism regardless of category, regardless, I mean, because of what we've been through, and that we have a more communal understanding now. Yes, that is, I would say it's safe to say that is something that we'll see expand beyond that e-com epiphany for sure.
Correct.
And then the final one is, this probably varies by industry, but what are the biggest hurdles brands will have to overcome once the vaccine becomes available to all?
Yeah, sorry, my head is still thinking about the experiential idea. I just want to point out that the idea for that is everyone wants to connect with a human being, and or some human experience, if you will. So making sure that the messaging feels as human as possible, that that there is a true real-time customer service, not just a 1-800 number that you can call and maybe there's a couple people on the other end, but surround sound 360 human support ecosystem for the brands. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out and make sure that everyone understands it's this idea of surround sound is really important. Okay, so the question one more time, Jen, was?
Sure. This probably varies by industry, but what are the biggest hurdles brands will have to overcome once the vaccine becomes available to all?
Yeah.
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I mean, one of the things we found, we had a slide on it a couple of slides back as well, which was, I think, company values or brand values and brand missions, brand purpose will become really more important if they already are and are. Once you go beyond, quality products, affordable pricing, and so on, what we found, if you remember, was honesty and transparency became really key drivers of trust. So brands will have to really work hard to earn their place in that. And then the other factor we noticed was that, yes, we are always trying to build a relationship with the individual customer. So that's not going to change. That'll continue to be important. But also people today are more conditioned to be looking for brands that serve the needs of the community, so that social, societal benefit will become more of a driver. And again, Gretchen did mention that millennials are coming of age or they're entering their 40s. And historically, that's when people tend to enter their peak earning and consuming years. So they'll become, they're a larger segment of the population than boomers ever were. So they will drive that phenomena as well. So those are the two big drivers, and I wouldn't call them hurdles. I think they're really two big opportunities for brands, whether they did such activities in the past or not, to sort of begin to look at their marketing actions from this point forward.
Yeah, and that they have a role in the bounce back, and people that's the expectation. It's not that we just expect GM to get in there, and Pfizer and J&J and Moderna to get in there and fix the world. Every brand, people expect now, oh wow, brands can do that. Brands can be our savior. Well, so the expectation now has been set. The bar has been set. Right. You have to have a role in the bounce back. You have to have a meaningful role, to what Suresh was saying. I mean, to see so high in the, what do you expect from a brand? To see protecting people's health and protecting the environment so high on a list. I mean, Suresh, you and I have been looking at brands for many, many years together combined. Never have I seen those things so high on a list. Right. So there is a global understanding, a communal understanding that brands have to have not just their own purpose, but a purpose for the world, and they need to act on it. Yeah, I guess that's a big hurdle. That's a big hurdle. But there's little things you can do, to my point, my point about those vaccine rewards, there's little things you can do to get there.
Okay, that wraps it up. That was my last question.
All right.
Good question to end this on.
Yeah, it was so good. Thank you everyone for joining and for staying with us, and certainly reach out to us with any questions. We're on all all the social channels, and we're happy to help and jump in and help you decide what your role is. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
thank
everyone.
you.